All right, I'm here today with Dusty Gannon, the man behind and the Goth Dad behind Vision Video out of Athens, Georgia. So, hi, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well.
Thank
Yeah.
you for taking the time to do this with me today. We are doing this quick little interview to advance your show coming to Jacksonville, Florida at Resurgence Goth Night at 1904 in
Yeah.
downtown Jacksonville. So I want to start off by letting people who are coming to the show kind of get, if they don't know who you are, get familiar with everything that you've been doing recently and in the past. And let's start off by kind of your beginnings, your origin story, and tell me about how Dusty became Vision Video.
Sure. Yeah. So, I guess it's a long story, but, I grew up as a teenager sort of in the goth scene from a very young age, like kind of getting into the music and the subculture around the age of like 13, 14. Um, my sister was kind of into it a little bit. And so I was kind of exposed to it from her. She's, older than me. So I looked up to her as a kid. So that was kind of my first introduction, but that was more on an aesthetic sense. I didn't really understand the music or, I wasn't really quite into music until a couple of years later when I really got into music and, finding bands like Susie and the Banshees, I think was like the first kind of band in the post-punk goth rock milieu that I discovered. But I got really into all of those kind of classic goth bands. And getting a little bit older, like around the age of 18, 19 was right when like Interpol was really big. So I was experiencing a lot of this music very quickly. And my friends from Atlanta, I was living right near Athens. My friends from Atlanta would take me to the goth nights there, and that's kind of that first time in my life where I like saw a large group of people and was like, oh, this is for me. Like this is my kind of group of people, and it really spoke to me. But I joined the military at a young age, like around 20, and I never stopped sort of listening to the music or even participating in the subculture. I got sort of thrown into a very different world though, and I joined the Army in 2007. So it was a very bad time to join the Army, very obvious reasons. There were two wars going on, and it was just like, I kind of threw caution to the wind and was just like, I need to do something that's like above myself. And my father was in the military, so I just kind of, it was like, this is something that's familiar, and I wanted to go see like extreme parts of the world. I wanted to not necessarily be part of evil and horrible things, but like just to be like to be in a war zone. Something about that in a very like naive sense spoke to me at the time, and I was smoking too much pot and like reading French existentialist literature. So I mean that didn't help that like very misguided thing that pushed me to that. But all my 20s spent like training and getting ready and then going to the war. For me it was Afghanistan. But I never, like, all that time I still had this music with me, and that's like something that really kept me sane. And as I moved along through time, I went to the war and came back, and that music, and then what became my own music, really helped me process a lot of that stuff. So when I came back in 2016, I became a firefighter. I worked in the Metro Atlanta area over the past 5 years, and sort of concurrently was building what is now Vision Video, which is the band that I play in. And so Vision Video, in essence, is like a sort of an amalgam of my processing like a lot of trauma that I've been through, but also like other people's trauma, things that I've been privy to as a paramedic and firefighter now. Just having seen so many like tragic and crazy things. And not obviously not everything that we write about is like directly like a direct facsimile of something that I've been through. A lot of it is sort of metaphor and but it's sort of like generalized. It's all about mental health awareness, like understanding that it's okay to not be okay. And if you've got mental health issues, like these are things that are worth like talking about and exploring, because the more that you do what I did when I first came back from Afghanistan, and what I had done historically with, dealing with trauma from, things that I saw in the fire department world, I just sort of buried them down for a long time and said like, well, it's not that bad. Like I'm doing okay, so I must be fine, which was like so far from the truth. So really this band is sort of paying homage to a lot of the music that I grew up with, that I love, but it's doing so in a way that does really two things. Number one, it's paying homage without direct like derivation and like just like replication of something that's already been done. It's sort of doing it in a way that's saying thank you for the music that came before, but here's like a new take on this too. But it's also, like I said, kind of mentioned before, it is a way to process my life, and it has saved my life, really, like in a quite literal sense. When I have been in some very dark times, the band and the music that we create has been a cornerstone or a touchstone for me to kind of remember, like, you can get through this, and you've done this before. And even when I get back into that headspace, I can like kind of think back to everything that we've gone through and where we are now. And I guess that brings me to today, where like I just recently left the fire department and I'm doing this full time now. And it's really exciting. It's also terrifying because like it's not financially sustainable at this moment, but I'm hoping that it will be as we grow. It's just like really cool because I feel like I'm still helping people, and I'm still like working towards bigger things that are above myself, but in a very different way. And it's a much more like healthy and safe way for me. Like I'm no longer charging into burning buildings, but I think that the amount of people that have come up to us at shows and said like, hey, I really appreciate, the messages that you guys convey, that is like just as satisfying, if not more in some ways. So.
Now, did you, as far as playing music goes, were you into guitar or anything musically before you went into the Army, like from a young age? When did you sort of like find your voice in music?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I grew up in a very, very rural part of Georgia where that's like literally 30 minutes away from anything. And I didn't have a driver's license until I was 18 because my parents really couldn't even afford a car. So it was like, kind of like, why even bother getting a license? So I spent a lot of time out in the middle of nowhere in Georgia. And because of that, I spent a lot of time listening to music and playing, my version of music, which was, a little bit of guitar and a little bit of synthesizers that I picked up. So, I kind of got started when I was a teenager, just like out of sheer boredom. I mean, if anything, it was just like, there's literally nothing to do out here other than like go hunting, which I'm, not really, it's not really my thing. Like I did it when I was a teenager, my dad, and, I don't really have a problem with it, but, it was just never something that like spoke to me. But yeah, so, I mean, I just had this, like this wealth of time back then. But then as like I got into the military, and then when I went back to college and stuff like that, like music became very apparently like more important to my life. But I guess I considered myself more of like a hobbyist than somebody that like really was deliberately trying to make music for reception of other people, I guess I should say, until I was like getting ready to leave the active duty Army in 2016. I was like, well, I could go kind of anywhere in the world. I was leaving Germany. I was stationed over there for several years, and I was like, I could go. I kind of always wanted to live in New York. I was like thinking about New York or New Orleans or a couple other places. But I realized like Athens, where I went to college, is like a wonderful city if you want to make music. And this kind of idea that I'd been ruminating on for like months before I got out of the army was like, hey, like, why don't you just go try to like start a band, you know, put your best foot forward and just like see what happens, you know, like don't put all your chickens in the basket, so to speak, on like, I'm just going to go do this right now. Because like I realized like, okay, I really have to kind of relearn a lot of guitar and a lot of like songwriting stuff. But yeah, I mean, moving back to Athens was like really, now that I look back on it, I'm like so grateful that I did come back here, because the city of Athens, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people recognize the name, but you know, we are a music town. Like no matter what else happens here, I always consider Athens a music city. You know, bands like REM, B-52s, Pylon, you know, then and so many others really cemented the firmament of music in this city. And yeah, it's I'm just like that was probably the most like deliberate decision that kind of got me to where I am now with music.
Nice. So tell me kind of where the Goth Dad persona came from. You've got a lot of TikTok videos and sort of a very, I know you said you tackle a lot of serious subjects, but you also kind of go the opposite direction. And
Yeah.
with your Goth Dad
Yeah.
persona, where'd that kind of come from?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of hilarious in retrospect. So the literal genesis of that character comes from like, I do what's called, I write these things called, I call them scratch tracks. And it's just like a colloquialism for like when I want to write a song, I will like write a riff or a melody or whatever, and I'll just like turn on the drum machine, and I'll do that to develop the song further, like develop the vocal melodies and just sort of the overall vibe of the song. So in these like scratch tracks, I very commonly will write like either total nonsense lyrically, or like something that's like kind of funny so that I can kind of remember it and like work on the performance and stuff. So Goth Dad, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but there was actually a literal theme song. And so I was working on this like song, and it's super simple. It's just like it's a guitar riff, a couple bass notes, and like some really basic synthesizer in the background. And you know, so I'm writing this scratch track, and it was like, I don't know like where exactly it came from. I just spent some time with our bass player Dan's parents. Like we all went out to dinner, and I had just seen like my dad. So I was thinking about dads, I guess, because my dad's like really big like on dad jokes. He's just this like constant retinue of horrible jokes. I mean, I love it, but it's horrible. But anyway, so like I was like thinking about dads, I guess, and I was like, wouldn't it be funny if there was just like this the goth dad? You know, it's like this kind of like very stereotypical, like cheesy, cringy dad, but he's also like really like actually legit sort of goth, like knows his stuff, like, you know, has like good makeup skills. Like you know, he's somebody to kind of usher in, you know, the baby bats to this subculture, which everybody kind of does have this like person that kind of introduces them. Like for me, it was my friend Lori. But anyway,
Sure.
so I post that on TikTok, you know, because I was like, oh, this is kind of funny. Like I was like, this, you know, like similarly to my dad, I am full of awful jokes, but because there's such a volume of them, at like 1 out of 1,000 lands, and it lands really well. So I was laughing at it. So I was like, oh, I wonder if anybody else will think this is funny. So I like wrote the song, and I kind of polished it up, and I posted it online, and like there was just this like very hilarious response to it, and people are like, what is this, like Goth Dad, are you kidding me? And a bunch of people on TikTok, like I was kind of done with, like I was like, that's it, like that's Goth Dad, like that's the video, and I was gonna kind of move on, but all these people were like, oh man, like, is this like a new character? Like, what's he do? Like, what's Goth Dad all about? And I was like, huh, okay. Well, I guess people want me to do this. So I just like started to kind of consider, I grew up as like a theater kid. I was in theater in high school. I did a lot of productions and stuff. And I've always kind of peripherally done some sort of like acting thing in various points of my life. So I was like, maybe it'd be fun to do this as a fully fleshed out character. So I started to kind of build the lore, and I'm still like kind of figuring it out as I go along. And there's actually going to be soon like a whole like backstory and all this stuff. But like Goth Dad is essentially, in essence, a 1700-year-old Midwestern vampire. People are always like, oh, where's he from? And I'm like, well, right now he's kind of Midwestern, but he's been from many epochs in time, and he's been all over the world, and so he's got like all this experience. But yeah, like I just like, so Dan's parents are from like Wisconsin and the Midwest generally. So like when I had met them, they were like hyper stereotypical. Like they're really sweet, they're very wholesome, but they're like, oh geez, like, oh, won't you get that beer for dinner? Oh, don't have more than one, no, honey. You got to watch your cholesterol on that bratwurst there. Like just that kind of like, it was, and I love it. And I'm really good at like picking up accents for some reason. So, yeah, that's kind of like where it all came from. And, and like, it took a while for me to like fully understand like why it was resonating with people. Because for like when I first started doing it, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this like long term, like just like.
Do I want to be Goth
Dad? Yeah, and it's funny to me now because like I look back on me being in my head about that kind of stuff, and I'm like, now like I get recognized at like the grocery store as Goth Dad sometimes, and I'm like, well, you're Goth Dad now. And I've also, my partner and I have this kind of back and forth where we both have been realizing that slowly I am like actually like Brundlefly from The Fly, like I'm actually becoming Goth Dad, like in real life. Like I say oh geez all the time now, and it's like totally unironic, and like, I'm just like full of bad jokes. And anyway, but now like I started to really understand like, okay, there's some really positive, mentally healthy, cool stuff that I can do for like younger kids that are getting into all this stuff. A, and then B, just people that don't have like a father figure. And it's like, I obviously don't have any sort of pretense in my mind that like I'm going to be your father figure, because like having a healthy father figure is not installable from a 30-second TikTok video. But it's just like, if anything, I'm just putting something out into the universe. It's like, my dad was great and is great. And I'm so lucky to have had like a really healthy father figure in my life. And like, here's what I think that looks like. And here's what I hope people can, bring into their own, father figurehood or whatever. Or if it just provides some like temporary reprieve and comfort for somebody that never had that. I find that all totally and equally satisfying and equally meaningful. And that's why I continue doing it. There was definitely a time where I was like, maybe I'm done with this. But now it's like, it just feels like sort of natural and totally enjoyable.
Well, I love it. I hope you do keep going on it. Okay, one last thing before I let you go is, what can we expect from the live show that you're going to bring? Because you're going on tour, right? So what is a Vision video live show going to be like?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of energy. Unfortunately, I was pretty severely injured a couple weeks back. I have a massively herniated disc in my spine right now, which is, as it turns out, not fun. Again, in keeping with becoming Goth Dad, now I have the injured back, which is like the true signifier of a dad. But I'm doing a lot better now. My mobility is like still a little less than it usually is. So the show on my behalf will be a little more tame than usual, but still a ton of energy. And we, it's not all about me. There are 3 incredible other phenomenal musicians that bring a ton of intensity and energy to the stage.
Well, let's give them some love. Who's coming with you?
Yeah, so we've got Emily Friedock. She's the co-vocals and keyboardist. We've got Jason Fusco, who's our phenomenal drummer, and Dan Geller is our bass player. And yeah, each one of them are very different, but bring something like totally amazing to this band. So yeah, just like overall, very high energy, high energy performance with some really cool covers of songs that we love that brought us inspiration, and maybe even a couple terrible jokes. I mean, it's always asked for, and
That's what I'm coming for. All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time today, and we're going to see you on Saturday.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're looking forward to it. It's our first time there, so we're very excited.
Thanks.
Cheers. Yeah, thanks for having me. Take care.